Okay, Mirel Goldstein here from goldsteintherapy.com, and today I was going to talk a little bit about relationship patterns and expectations and the ways in which these can be unconscious, meaning out of our awareness, and how this can affect our relationships today, in the present. So we all develop certain kinds of schemas or expectations, files, you could say, about what to expect in relationship situations. And these are developed the same way we would develop a script or an information set about really any experience that we have. So if you go into a restaurant, for example, you might not know what to do the first time you're in a restaurant, but if you, from the time you're a child, you go into a restaurant a bunch of times, and the same sequence happens every time you go in. You go in, you find a table, your waiter comes, you order, you eat, you pay, you leave. Then after a while, you don't have to think about that anymore. When you're in a restaurant, your brain just pulls up that schema, and the whole script of what's supposed to happen in that situation is kind of something that you just know how to play it out. You don't really have to think much about it. So it's unconscious at that point, and it's sort of automatic. And we develop similar types of scripts when it comes to relationships. If most of our experiences with our early caregivers are rewarding and responsive and loving, if we're picked up when we cry and we're fed when we're hungry and we're nurtured and taken care of and loved, and we develop expectations about relationships that we're going to be loved in relationships and responded to, and if we ask for things we need or we protest if there's something that's not feeling right, people are going to be responsive. If you have experiences with early caregivers that are more difficult, you might develop certain expectations of relationships playing out in a more difficult way, that you'll be abandoned or left alone or ignored, or even that someone will become angry at you if you ask for what you need or if you speak up on your own behalf. So we develop a lot of these ideas about relationships very early on, often before we have words. So it's kind of pre-verbal, and that makes it even more hard to bring it into consciousness and become aware of these patterns, because they develop at a time when we don't have language to encode it into. And so it's just something that happens when we're in a situation that reminds us of those early situations without us necessarily understanding at the time what's going on. And what I really want to talk about today is sort of what happens in adult relationships with some of these early unconscious expectations, how we bring them into our new relationships in the present, and how these past expectations or experiences shape the way we interact in our relationships and can really make a big difference in terms of whether we're able to create relationship scenarios that go differently from painful experiences we've had in the past, and also help us move towards relationship experiences that are rewarding or that repeat good experiences that we've had. So usually what happens is we have these expectations, they happen over and over again, and our brain creates these schemas or files with a lot of information about what to expect when there are different sets of cues or stimuli coming into our environment. And so, for example, if your parents were very critical, someone who reminds you of your parents in the sense that it's another authority figure, like a teacher, a boss, you could have that same expectation that that authority figure is going to be critical towards you. There might be someone who's not another authority figure, but they remind you of your parent in some other way. They look the way your parent looked, or something about them reminds you. It could be your partner reminds you of your parent, and so you have that same expectation that there's going to be a relationship filled with criticism, and that's kind of a script that's going to play out for you in that given relationship. And so we pull up these cues and then we respond in different ways based on that. So one thing that happens is sometimes we're just attracted to things that are familiar. So if we are nurtured and responded to, then we may be attracted to partners or other relationships where the same thing happens. Another thing can happen, if we are attracted to something more difficult, someone who is dismissive towards us, or puts us down or makes us question ourselves. Those might be things that we learn to expect in early relationships, and we're not necessarily aware of it, but we just kind of are drawn to those things without even realizing it. Sometimes we even have a sense of what we didn't like, and we kind of make up our minds that we're not going to go towards that kind of situation again, but then we just do it. And a lot of the reason that happens is because a lot of what we're responding to is very nonverbal, unconscious kinds of cues, and so we don't necessarily see it on the surface. But if we go a little deeper into the dynamic, we can see that there's definitely a similarity or a pattern that's kind of playing out. Another thing that can happen is maybe you're attracted to someone who's very different from the original situation, but you experience it as if it's the same thing. You project onto it your earlier expectations. So maybe you have a partner who is very accepting and non-judgmental, but because you had such critical experiences of such criticism with your parents, you might experience your partner as being critical when they're not trying to be critical. So they make a neutral comment and you actually react to it as if you're being criticized, when really that's not where they're coming from at all. So that's another thing that can kind of happen. We can be attracted to things that are familiar. We can also see things as being familiar even when maybe objectively speaking the situation is a little bit different. Another thing that happens at times is we call it in psychological terms turning passive into active, where we actually play the role of what was done to us in the active position at this point. So someone who was bullied or abused may become a bully. So they're not actually attracted to another bully, but they are switching the roles, and they're doing to the other person what was done to them. They're kind of relating to their partner or the other person as if they're the victim that you once were, and kind of turning the tables. Another thing that can happen is we may actually, in a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of way, create a dynamic that is familiar, that we don't like, but that is just very familiar to us and we're not aware of it. So we might behave in ways in a relationship that evokes what's familiar to us. So maybe if we expect people to become angry with us, we'll push their buttons over and over again until they do become angry, and then it kind of reinforces our sense of, oh yeah, this is what happens in relationships. People get angry. So there's a lot of different ways in which our past experiences and expectations can influence us and affect us in the present. It could be it could be an expectation of abandonment, an expectation of criticism. It could be an expectation of someone holding power over us and putting us in a powerless position. It could be an expectation of someone responding when we're very desperate. So we learn that we have to, go into crisis or become very dramatic about our feelings or experiences in order to create a responsiveness in the other person. It could be an expectation of someone distorting their view of us, so not seeing us for who we are, but kind of viewing us through their own distorted filter or the needs of their own ego. So there are a lot of different ways in which we approach, our present day experiences using information that we really gathered in the past. And a lot of times it really takes kind of an objective third party to help us unpack some of these things and sort of disentangle ourselves from those original filters that everything just keeps getting absorbed into, and being able to see things through a new lens. So thank you for listening. I know this is a little bit of a short clip. I just wanted to give a little overview about that. I find that my patients find this kind of information really helpful about ways in which we play out our past patterns in current relationships. You're welcome to visit me on Facebook, facebook.com/Goldstein Therapy. You can also go to my blog, goldsteintherapy.com. And I look forward to hearing from you if you have any questions or comments. Bye.